they're going to go to fucking federal prison. Federal fucking prison.
Imagine a man who wasn't known for knockout power or brute strength, but for his mind a fighter who saw the game differently, who could read opponents like a book, predict their movements before they happened, and turn chaos into calculation. His name was James Krause, once called the chess master of MMA. For years, he wasn't just a fighter, he was a thinker, a tactician, a man who studied not just how to win fights, but how fights were won. But behind that calm, methodical genius, there was another side, one that few ever saw coming. Because while Krause was building a reputation as one of the smartest minds in combat sports, he was also building something else, a secret empire that would shake the foundations of the UFC itself. This is the story of how one man's intellect became his downfall, how brilliance, ambition, and greed collided to create one of the most shocking scandals in MMA history. James Krause's journey began in small-town Missouri, a place where fighters didn't dream of fame or money, they just dreamed of surviving. From a young age, he wasn't like other kids. He wasn't the biggest or fastest, but he was relentless. He'd train when others slept, study when others partied, and fight when others doubted him. Every loss was a lesson, every scar a strategy. When he entered the MMA scene, he didn't have big sponsors or fancy gyms, just grit, tape, and an obsession with being smarter than everyone else in the cage.
Fight in particular, the line changed right before the fight from like, I think the favorite was like maybe minus 220 or something like that to then like negative 450 with 4-1 favorite. And more specifically, it was like of a KO in the first round, and it happened in like 48 seconds.
Over time, people began to notice. Analysts praised his IQ. Fighters admired his adaptability. Even commentators like Joe Rogan and Daniel Cormier called him one of the most cerebral fighters alive. He wasn't there to brawl, he was there to break you down mentally, piece by piece. But the brutal truth about MMA is that intelligence doesn't always pay the bills. Krause fought on undercards, scraping by with small purses and bigger dreams. He once said in an interview that he made more money flipping houses than fighting. That single quote would come back to haunt him. Because deep down, Krause was tired of fighting for pennies while the world around him gambled millions on men like him. And somewhere in that frustration, a dangerous thought began to grow. What if he could beat the system, not in the cage, but outside it? When his fighting career began to fade, Krause did what many great fighters do, he evolved. He opened Glory MMA and Fitness, a tight-knit gym where he taught his students to think, not just hit. He trained killers, sharp, disciplined, analytical. Fighters like Brandon Moreno, who would go on to become UFC flyweight champion, were molded by his methods. Under Krause, even average fighters began looking elite. He had a formula, a system, and it worked. Soon, everyone wanted a piece of it. But Krause's obsession with patterns, numbers, and probabilities didn't stop at fighting. He started watching betting lines, noticing how they moved when certain fighters had bad camps.
I won't even say his name, but one of these trainers was apparently aware of injuries and then informing like a group of people online who are betting.
Or hidden injuries. To most people, betting was luck. To Krause, it was math. He saw trends nobody else did. Injuries, weight cuts, fighter psychology, these were data points. What began as casual betting turned into something more serious. He started sharing his picks online, and fans noticed how often he was right. His predictions weren't guesses, they were precise. Then came his private Discord group, a hidden community where fans could pay to access his inside tips and fight breakdowns. Thousands joined, paying up to $2,000 a month. The results were shocking. People claimed they were winning big, calling Krause's system foolproof. He wasn't just a coach anymore, he was a gambling guru.
So they're saying like, hey, this guy's got something wrong with him.
Right.
He's not going to win this fight. And then all the money would go on the opponent, and then they would rake it in. And this happened allegedly.
And the UFC, which had just embraced sports betting as a major sponsor, didn't seem to notice. Until one night in 2022 changed everything. November 5, 2022, UFC Fight Night, Las Vegas. On paper, it was just another card. But behind the scenes, it was the night that would expose the darkest corner of the sport. One of Krause's fighters, Derek Minner, was set to face Shailon Nuerdanbeek. Hours before the fight, betting sites across the US and Canada began lighting up with suspicious activity. Massive bets came flooding in not just against Minner, but on a specific outcome, that he'd lose in the first round, by injury. The odds shifted wildly, and sportsbooks knew something was wrong. When the fight began, the suspicion became fact. Minner threw one kick, winced, and clutched his leg. His knee was already damaged. Seconds later, the fight was over. And in that moment, alarms went off in every major betting company in North America. Someone had insider knowledge. Someone knew too much. Within 48 hours, the FBI was investigating. ESPN reported massive betting irregularities.
Just wanted to get an update from you. We haven't heard you in this forum talking about the betting investigation that's going on. I know there's only so many things you can say, but is there any updates you can give us on what's going on currently?
There's literally nothing I can say about that.
The Nevada State Athletic Commission got involved. And in the center of it all, James Krause. The UFC panicked. This wasn't just about one coach, it was about the credibility of the entire sport. Within weeks,
It says UFC's Jeff Molina suspended for alleged substantial involvement in ongoing James Krause investigation. Substantial.
Yeah, he was on, I've heard a thing that he was on his Discord, and he said that, like, Jeff Molina said that, like, you know, I paid my mortgage, my house, my phone bill, everything with this Discord right here. Make sure you guys join it. So, like, he was pushing it hard.
Dana White issued one of the harshest statements in UFC history. Any fighter who continues to be associated with James Krause will not be permitted to fight in the UFC. Overnight, Krause's gym collapsed. Fighters left in tears. Brandon Moreno, once his prized student, was forced to sever ties before his title defense. Glory MMA shut down. Krause disappeared from public life, his social media deleted, his name erased from commentary. In the world of MMA, he became a ghost. But investigators didn't stop there. The FBI dug into his Discord servers, his PayPal records, his cryptocurrency transactions. What they found painted a chilling picture. Krause's betting group wasn't casual, it was structured, organized, and massive. He had tiers of subscribers, VIP insiders, and people who claimed he gave them access to information no one else could know: injury reports, sparring outcomes, private gym data. Whether Krause himself profited directly or was simply the mastermind, the damage was irreversible. The UFC faced backlash from regulators, media, and fans. Sportsbooks temporarily pulled UFC betting altogether. In Canada, major provinces outright banned wagering on UFC fights until reforms were made. The organization was forced to rewrite its entire code of conduct, banning fighters, coaches, and even family members from betting on any fight.
People ask me, well, what were they talking about? Somebody was saying, well, what's the UFC going to do? We let these guys know not to bet on fights. Do you know what the outcome of this is? Like, if I penalize them, you get cut. They're going to go to fucking federal prison. Federal fucking prison.
What was once a gray area became black and white overnight. And at the center of that seismic shift was one man, a coach who outsmarted everyone until he didn't. But the real story goes deeper than headlines. Because Krause wasn't some villain twirling his mustache in secret. He was a man crushed by a broken system, a system that underpays fighters, undervalues coaches, and leaves even champions struggling financially. For every Conor McGregor millionaire, there are hundreds of fighters sleeping on gym mats. Krause saw that reality up close, and maybe, in his own twisted logic, he thought he'd simply found a smarter way to survive. But in chasing that control, he broke the very trust that makes combat sports sacred. He blurred the line between competition and corruption. And in doing so, he forced the entire industry to face its own reflection. Behind the scenes, fighters who once admired him were torn apart. Some defended him, saying he was misunderstood, that he was just educating people about betting responsibly. Others saw him as the man who nearly destroyed their careers. Many lost sponsors, fights, and credibility simply for being associated with him. The FBI's findings remain largely sealed, but whispers inside the MMA world suggest the probe uncovered networks of insiders, not just Krause, but other coaches, managers, and even fighters trading information quietly for years. Some believe Krause wasn't the mastermind, he was the scapegoat, the public sacrifice to protect bigger names. the aftermath changed everything. The UFC created a new integrity division, implemented real-time betting surveillance, and partnered with federal agencies to track suspicious activity. Fighters now undergo education programs about gambling ethics. And every time an odd line shifts sharply before a fight, someone, somewhere, checks for a ghost, the ghost of Krause. He's become the invisible hand in every investigation, the cautionary tale whispered in every locker room. Don't be the next Krause. But what happened to the man himself? To this day, nobody knows for sure. Some say he moved states under a new identity, quietly training select fighters behind closed doors. Others claim he left the sport entirely, disillusioned, isolated, and watching from afar as the empire he helped build thrives without him. There's even rumor he still runs private groups under aliases, giving advice under different names. Whether he's truly gone or still playing the game from the shadows, no one can say. But his influence lingers. Because James Krause didn't just expose corruption, he exposed temptation. He proved that in a sport where pain and risk are currency, information is the ultimate weapon. Today, when a fighter walks to the octagon, every camera, every statistic, every number is being watched, logged, analyzed. Trust is the rarest commodity left. The UFC may have become stronger after the scandal, more polished, more corporate, but it also lost something raw, something human. Krause's story is a tragedy not just of greed, but of intelligence turned inward, of a man too smart for his own good. He wanted to master every aspect of the fight game, and he did, until the game fought back. And maybe, that's the true lesson. You can outthink opponents, predict outcomes, even manipulate odds, but you can't outsmart consequence. James Krause didn't just play the system, he revealed it, ripped its flaws into daylight. And while his name is now erased from the UFC's memory, his shadow will always remain in its rules, its warnings, and its whispers. Because in the end, Krause didn't just lose his career, he changed the sport forever. So the next time you see a fighter raise their hand in victory, remember, somewhere out there, a man once believed he could control it all. He believed intelligence was power. But in the fight between brilliance and greed, greed always lands the final punch. And that's why James Krause will forever be remembered as the man who outsmarted everyone until he outsmarted himself, but even after the lights went out at Glory MMA, the echoes of what James Krause had done didn't fade. In fact, that was just the beginning. What followed was a storm, not just of investigations and rumors, but of fear, silence, and a reckoning that forced the entire UFC to question its own foundations. Fighters who had once stood proudly under the Glory banner were suddenly treated like outcasts. Some couldn't find new gyms. Others were quietly dropped from fight cards. Sponsors pulled out. For them, this wasn't just a scandal, it was exile.
There's an investigation going on, and see how it plays out.
How concerning is this for you about like kind of the integrity, not only of this organization, but as the sport as a whole?
Zero. I'm not worried about it at all.
Dana White's public confidence aside, the fact that a federal investigation has been ongoing for years suggests this is serious business.
And yet, the deeper people dug, the more it became clear, Krause's story wasn't isolated. It was a symptom of something much bigger, something rooted in the economics of fighting itself. For years, fans had celebrated the spectacle, the blood, the grit, but behind the glamour, fighters were surviving paycheck to paycheck. Many earned less than the cost of a small business employee. A broken hand could mean months without income. A cancelled fight could destroy a career. And when you live in that kind of uncertainty, temptation creeps in easily. Krause's betting ring wasn't just a crime, it was a mirror showing the desperation inside the cage. Investigators found that some fighters had been invited into Krause's Discord, not as fans, but as insiders, quietly passing information about training injuries, weight issues, and fight strategies. It wasn't always malicious, sometimes it was just casual talk, unaware that a single sentence could move betting lines across entire countries. But that's the thing about corruption, it rarely starts with villains. It starts with people trying to survive. As the FBI dug deeper, whispers emerged that Krause wasn't even the top of the pyramid. Some claimed there were others, people higher up, managing large betting pools across multiple states, using MMA insiders as information brokers. But no one could prove it. Files went missing. Witnesses went quiet. Fighters refused to speak on record. It was as if an invisible hand had drawn a curtain over the truth. Meanwhile, Dana White and the UFC faced their biggest crisis in years. The organization had worked tirelessly to clean its image from the days of bar fights and chaos to billion-dollar corporate partnerships. But now, those same sponsors were asking questions. DraftKings, BetMGM, FanDuel, the lifeblood of UFC's new business model, wanted guarantees that the sport was clean. That no one inside the system could manipulate the odds. Overnight, the UFC launched its Integrity Task Force. Meanwhile, the betting world itself was shifting. The James Krause incident became a case study across the industry. Regulators demanded more transparency from sportsbooks, and algorithms were developed to detect abnormal betting spikes. Companies began flagging accounts linked to gyms, fight camps, and even nutritionists. Entire networks were mapped: who trained with who traveled together, who posted cryptic tweets before fights. Betting wasn't just numbers anymore, it was surveillance. And it all traced back to one man who once said he could beat the system. Ironically, in trying to beat it, he made it smarter. Behind closed doors, the UFC boardroom was filled with tension. Some executives wanted to publicly condemn Krause, brand him a criminal, and move on. Others feared doing that would only keep his name alive, that silence was safer. Dana White, known for his explosive reactions, stayed oddly quiet. Some insiders claimed he was furious, others said he admired Krause's intelligence but hated his arrogance. What was undeniable was the shadow the scandal left. From that point forward, every fight, every corner, every coach was watched with suspicion. The culture of trust that had once defined MMA, the brotherhood between fighter and trainer, was fractured. Months later, a journalist from The Athletic published a bombshell report citing leaked documents from state regulators that suggested Krause's network had extended beyond UFC fighters. Amateur leagues, regional promotions, and even international circuits showed suspicious betting patterns tied to the same IPs. The implication was staggering: Krause's influence had reached deeper than anyone imagined. This wasn't a one-time crime. It was a system, and he had built it quietly under everyone's nose. But even in exile, Krause remained a mystery. Former students described him as brilliant but dangerous. One said, he didn't see betting as cheating. To him, it was just data, another way to win. That mindset, that cold rationality, was both his weapon and his curse. To the end, Krause didn't believe he had done anything wrong. In his mind, the UFC's moral outrage was hypocrisy, a billion-dollar company that profited from betting partnerships pretending to be shocked when someone played their own game. And in some ways, he wasn't wrong. The entire industry had monetized gambling, but only Krause had dared to play inside it. As years passed, documentaries began to surface. Podcasts dissected the scandal. YouTubers analyzed his betting strategies, claiming to have recreated his methods. Some painted him as a villain, others, as a misunderstood genius who exposed the system's cracks. Either way, his legend grew. James Krause had become more than a man, he was a symbol. The forbidden name in MMA. A reminder of how easily power and information could twist even the purest intentions. And for the UFC, the cost was more than money. It was trust. Sponsors demanded stricter control. Commissions required new compliance frameworks. Fighters faced mental pressure, afraid that a simple injury might spark rumors of fixing. Fans watched with new skepticism, analyzing every suspicious move in the cage. The sport's innocence, the raw unpredictability that made MMA magical, had been replaced by paranoia. All because one man crossed a line the industry didn't even know existed. In a quiet suburb years later, neighbors reported seeing a man who looked like Krause, same build, same posture, training small groups in private garages. No social media. No fanfare. Just old-school coaching, away from cameras. If it really was him, maybe that was his punishment, to live in silence, watching the empire he built continue without him. A genius in exile, erased by his own ambition. But maybe, deep down, that's how he wanted it. Because in a strange way, Krause did what no one else could. He forced the UFC to evolve. He made them face the dark truth behind their success. He showed that knowledge, real knowledge, could shake an empire. His story is no longer just a scandal, it's a warning. A warning that in a world where every punch is worth millions, integrity is the rarest currency of all. And so, the legend of James Krause continues, not in the octagon, not in the betting forums, but in the silence that follows every fight. When the crowd cheers and the lights fade, the whispers return. Who really controls the game? How deep does it go? And if one man could do it once, who's stopping the next one from trying again? Because the truth is, the fight game will always attract those who crave control. And maybe that's the ultimate irony, that the man who tried to control everything ended up losing the only thing he ever truly had, his place in the sport he loved.